got a little over 5 weeks before the election, and we've got a legal dispute really hung up in courts that threatens to not create chaos at the polls, but certainly make it that much harder for Secretary of State Bill Gardner to carry out the run-up to that election. House Speaker Bill O'Brien last week really surprised many observers by essentially saying a bill that requires a new voter registration form equates domicile to residency. And if you look at the language of the bill, that's really a hard sell to make. The language does say that new voters who are registering for the first time need to be told that if they're residents, they have to have a driver's license and get a motor vehicle and register their motor vehicle within 60 days of becoming residents. But it doesn't say they have to be residents to vote. And that's what this lawsuit was all about. And that was brought by the League of Women Voters and the Civil Liberties Union in New Hampshire. Now, a Superior Court judge has already ruled that to enjoin that law because of the confusion it could create for these new voters who may think they have to be residents. But the Speaker said that's what the law actually equates to. He's asked for reconsideration of that decision rather than going up on appeal to the Supreme Court. By doing that, it certainly delays the ultimate judgment here, whether he, and by reconsidering the decision, he gets to, O'Brien, through the Attorney General's office, gets to introduce this argument that domicile equals residency. But it's going to take more time to do that. If he loses again before Judge Lewis, and he could well do that, I suspect he will, he'll have to appeal that to the Supreme Court. The clock is ticking. New forms are going to have to be created. If the forms that were created by this new law are invalid. So by making this argument, House Speaker Bill O'Brien has certainly made life a little more difficult for Bill Gardner. But Gardner said at the end of last week he agrees with Speaker O'Brien that that's mainly the thrust of this law, whether it's in the precise language or not. That's the intent of this law. So he's on board, which is important because he's the client with the Attorney General. So they're going to ask for this reconsideration. We'll follow this legal dispute because depending on what happens with regard to it, could have a lot to do with whether there's chaos on at the polling place or not, particularly in the college towns in New Hampshire. We'll follow it here for you at lobbyandh.com.